Welcome to A Court of Transformation and Awakening. I'm Lorrie Gray.
And I'm Amanda Grace Harrison.
And in this episode, we are discussing chapter 27 and 28. Not our favorite.
No, well, parts of 27 are definitely on my eternally leaving flags in there. Unless I have to take them out because they're like, oh, Mom thought this part was important. Whoa,
why did Mom think that was important?
Might remove flags, but...
So we just had this scene with Rhysand showing up and, and that's so important for what happens in this chapter and making sense of it, where Tamlin, even as High Lord, and we recognize that not all High Lords are created equal, apparently. And this is somebody that, we can understand Tamlin's actions in this chapter because he just had this moment of feeling powerless.
Super
and
low point.
And he recognizes that, like, the only thing he could do was get on his knees and beg, and even then he had no control over the situation.
Oh.
So instead...
but what I love here...
what you got?
I might have even asked Lucian about everything, but like the coward I was, I bolted to my room where Alice was waiting with a cup of molten chocolate.
Oh, I hadn't even flagged that one.
Like, the molten chocolate.
It's like,
I'm so glad that
let's just avoid and go have some chocolate.
Let's just go.
Okay, there's a thing there. But I mean, I think that is significant here, where like there was this whole thing and she's not willing to engage in it, and that honestly is really significant in what happens in chapter 27 and 28. I feel like there is so much of Feyre's character here, and I think honestly, if we hadn't been with her up to this point, I think it would be easy to judge her in these chapters a lot, and like from the outside, to be like, quit being an idiot. But like I love that we get to see her dialogue and we can understand her choices here. So basically, after the end of all of that, Tamlin's like, I'm sending you home. And oh gosh, like something inside me splintered. I'm sending you home.
And I've taken on your life debt. That was significant.
Because she's like, okay, but what about this treaty? I thought the whole thing was like I couldn't do this. He's like, nope, I fixed it. Which again, interesting that like, so apparently that could have happened the whole time. Yeah. He's like, nope, but you said there wasn't a loophole. The Suriel said, this, and he's like, just forget it. And so she's leaving.
And then we get another nice palm kiss. I like that one.
Hold on, but before that though, right before that.
Oh yes. Did I do something wrong?
Did I do something wrong? And here, like, this was just like a moment because she saw everything. Like, she was there when he showed up. She saw that he didn't have power, and like, there's enough context to understand why he's sending her away, and yet her brain still goes to, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. What could I have done differently so that you wouldn't be sending me away right now?
Yeah. And that's real life situation. Like, for me, whenever I see that happen with people, I'm like, to me, it's just such an indication of like trauma and complex trauma and things that happen when they were very, very young, and the way that our brains get programmed to always assume that we're the problem. And it's completely illogical. It doesn't make sense. And like, the brain disregards everything else. But like, we've spent so long thinking about life that way that, it's hard to be objective. But yeah, the fact that her brain went here. And I think that was the thing, like, she only had a very short amount of time of sort of living into this new reality. And I think that the thing that stood out for me that's very real life is it really takes a while to settle into new ways of thinking of ourselves and new ways of being. And we saw her experiencing that, right? And we're seeing her
just starting to really get comfortable in it.
And then something really major happens, and then we see her in this chapter fall back to old thought patterns. Yeah. And it's not because the work that she did before like wasn't there. She really didn't have enough time to settle into that new phase. And I was talking to a client about this yesterday. Like, they were kind of in a season of like not feeling like they wanted to take on a lot of new growth things. And I was really encouraging that because I think the way I've seen it in my life is I'll go through a season of intense growth and transformation, and then it's almost like you plateau. And I think some people think that's bad. I'm like, no. Like, you need a minute. Like, if you go through this massive shift, to actually just spend, I mean, honestly, I feel like minimum 3 months, but 6, I think, being a lot better, to just get used to seeing yourself through that new lens, to showing up in everyday situations in that new way, and to really get familiar with who you are there before you then try to go through this new growth season. I think when people are constantly pushing, they don't have enough time to get comfortable with the shift, and then it's not solid enough. And I'll see people like push, 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 and then it's almost like this rubber band snap where they end up like way further back.
Yeah. Right. So if you allow the plateau,
And just settle there. It's like, yeah, quit. Don't. You don't always have to be
you
in an
don't lose ground.
right. You don't have to be in an input season. Like just chill there. But what we see here for her is she did not really have enough time. She was starting to get there, and her brain is just going back to every place it was. And we see this again on 245. You may have some other markers before we get there,
That you were perfect.
but you were perfect. But he's saying that, but she goes through. We see her self-talk, her negative self-talk come back, because he's like, I'm sending you away, like, not forever, right? And she says, I suppose it'll be easier if I'm gone. Who wants someone around who's so covered in thorns? And he's like, thorns? She's like, yeah, thorny, prickly, sour, contrary. And all of her, we just see her go back to,
Yeah.
okay, something went wrong, and she's unable to hold on to that vision of being loved and being safe. And she immediately goes back to, there's something wrong with me. We see this resurgence of those single word name calling things.
No. And then just before that, let me help you. No. Didn't you read between the lines today? And she said, I hadn't, but I lifted my chin and crossed my arms. So you're sending me away because I'm useless in a fight? Again, back to the old.
He's like, I'm
self-talk
useless
and
in this fight.
yes.
Like, what are we talking about? But yeah, that she, oh gosh.
And
this is,
backsliding there.
and this is, yeah. And he's being so honest, like, that you were perfect and I'm sending you away because it makes me sick to, to thinking about you in their hands. And he's actually doing he's telling her the truth, and she just can't hear it.
But I mean,
Poor thing.
in her defense, geez, I mean, she just finally gets happy, and now he's literally like the worst possible thing he could do at this point is send her. Like now she's like, finally I have a home. I'm happy, happiest I've ever been in my life. Go away.
Yeah.
It's so traumatic. It's so
It
the
is.
world
And
being
that's
yanked up.
and that's what I mean, we can understand every bit of, like, if now again, like, and the reason I like these books and the writing is because it's so true to real life. It's not like, oh, I had this shift and now I'm forever changed. It's like, no, that's not how change works. Like, you gain some ground and then something happens and we're back to our old ways of thinking, and we have moments when we don't see clearly, and there's just so much truth here and I think we've journeyed with Feyre enough and seen enough of her internal dialogue that we can understand, yeah, like, we have compassion and understanding for why she reacts the way that she does. Oh my gosh. But so she's on the verge of all of this being taken away. And so we get a little physical and desperate.
No, I'm not gonna leave you. I'm gonna just get.
He lunged, a beast freed of its tether.
Oh, where's that?
247.
Oh, 247. Yes.
I'm a little ahead.
yeah, and my flag there is give me everything I breathed. Some good stuff.
So, yeah, so we have this
there.
moment.
Let you read.
We'll let you read all that.
Scene to yourself.
But then we have, we have
Read
this,
that out loud.
this really sweet moment of, like, falling asleep in his arms, and then she finds out how soon she's going home. I don't think she knew it was happening, but he's like, it's tomorrow
At dawn.
at dawn.
Jeez. I was leaving just when this place had become more than a sanctuary. When the command of the Suriel to stay with the High Lord had become a blessing, and Tamlin far, far more than a savior or friend. I was leaving.
Oh,
Home. This was home.
yeah, which is so interesting because now she's going to head back to this other place.
Real life, but
That's
not the real life she knew
It's
before.
not home. Okay,
And
so
then we end with, I
love you.
Thorns and all.
Thorns and all. Gosh, isn't that what we all just want to hear?
Yes.
Back to our, like, I think that was the thing, like, with we were talking about we were laughing after the last episode that we got into Twilight, Team Edward, Team Jacob. I'm like, it was going to happen at some point. It was going to.
I was thinking a whole separate episode, but I think we covered it.
Right. But this is kind of what reminds me of like why I was so like Team Edward, because I think, you know, in that, you know, Jacob was so much more like, if she was like thorny, he was like, you're thorny, like quit. Like he was so honest about it.
He would have been like, Bella, you stink, go take a shower.
Right. Where, Edward would have never like said anything. And I don't know, like the difference between like where I was at in that season of, you know, the honesty and being able to like hear honesty and like it to be like fully committed love, unconditional love, and truth. And I think I was in a place of like, just lie to me. Just tell me. Just tell me I'm perfect.
But be a really, really, really good actor / liar when you say it, because if I know you're lying, that's going to ruin it.
You know, because I wasn't in that place of like being okay, you know, with myself. But
with your thorns.
But this is, I wasn't okay with my thorns. But that space of being able to accept that we do have them and to not be in denial about it and to be loved unconditionally there is such a sweet moment. So, Tamlin, oh my gosh. Okay, so in chapter 27, start chapter 28. So 28 is her actually traveling home.
Well, morning.
And the parting thing, like she's so confused by all this because everybody seems mad at her.
Yeah.
Like where she's like, she's like, I'm saying I want to stay. He's telling me I have to go. I'm trying to like handle all of this, and then you all seem mad at me that I'm going. Like, poor girl.
Yeah, it's a very uncomfortable situation, and just it's just like adding insult to injury. Like, you're sending me away, and now everybody's being mean to me too, instead of being like, we love you so much.
He's like, I thought you were smarter than this, and she's like, well, goodbye to you too. Like, friend in need. Like, she doesn't understand why they are treating her this way. And I love that we get to see sort of her understanding of this, where she gets it. She's like, okay, if Rhysand came back, if this Amarantha person was indeed such a threat that I would only be another body for Tamlin to defend, I needed to go. She's like, I would not become a burden to him. I would not become another weight pressing on his shoulders. Like she's genuinely thought through this, where she's, in her mind, this is selfless. She's like, I want to stay, but I don't want to, like, I understand, like, this is already so hard on him. Like, I don't want to make it worse. Like, in her mind, this is, like, the most loving choice.
Yeah.
And then that's weird to be like, I feel like I'm doing the right thing, and y'all are mad at me. Like, how is that making sense?
Yeah. And she's, I like that she wants to say, I love you, too, when he says, I love you, but she doesn't want to, she thinks that that's going to be,
she thinks I'll be another burden
by saying I love you, because then it'll be like, oh no, now she loves me, now that would just add too much to his plate.
Almost like if he believes, okay, there's this girl, we had a moment, but maybe she doesn't care that strongly about me, that somehow that will make it easier for him. There's something to be said there about trying to make decisions for other people.
Yeah.
Or managing other people's emotional spaces,
distortions and boundaries and all that. I loved this. I could so relate to this when she's talking about, like, I wondered if he might try to persuade me to, like, go further, to sail south, to get even further away from this blight and everything that's happening, but understood that I would have refused to be so far from the wall, from him, that going back to my family was as far as I would allow to be sent from his side. I could so relate to that, because I remember when I was leaving for college, and I was still a little bit in love with my high school boyfriend, who he still had a year of high school left. And I wouldn't leave the state. I remember there were a couple of good colleges outside the state. And I just had this, like, no, I need to stay in Florida, because even though we were broken up and, like, we never dated again after that, but there was always this, like, we're probably going to end up we were on again, off again. So, like, we're probably going to get back together.
So I need to be close by.
And when people ask me, like, why I picked that college, and I'm like, honestly, there was this boy. Like, all right, it's enough. But I can relate to that. Like, there's only so far. I'm going to go 3 hours away, but I can't go 6 hours away, because that would just be too far.
Too far. Isn't that so funny? I can relate
to this. Even though it's like she's leaving. She's going across the wall. She can't see him at all, but something about being not that far away from the wall, she feels like now she's closer to him.
Yeah. See, it was funny. I had kind of the opposite experience where,
You wanted to get as far away as possible?
oh, no, well, yes, that. But when almost like, so Chris, when my husband and I were dating, when we were in college and dating, then there was this, volunteer opportunity. So we were in St. Louis. There was this volunteer opportunity to work with this nonprofit in Colorado, and we both wanted to go. But literally, the proposed plan was like drop out of college and move across the country together. And I was like, I will not be that cliche. I will not. I'm like, I will no. And as much as I'm like,
sounds bad on paper.
as much as it was like we were dating, like this was like it, and that was the thing. Like what was actually the path, like opening up in real life, probably would have been a great one to follow. But I was like, nope, nope. I'm like, I was imagining myself 10 years later or 2 days later, explaining to somebody what I was doing. And even though I'm like, I would tell this story about this like opportunity opening up and things like that, like it's going to be interpreted as you dropped out of college and moved across the country with a boy. And I was like, I will not be that person. And so we sort of negotiated let me change my, like my 4-year bachelor's to like 2 associates that I could finish up in 1 more semester. And also like there needs to be a ring on my finger. Like these are like my boundaries. Because there was a big difference between I got 2 associate's degrees and then me and my husband moved states.
Yes, there you go. Sounds way better.
But it didn't have anything to do with what was actually best for me. It was 1,000% about people's perceptions. I think there is also a little bit of wisdom because I was looking back at that, like at how transformative it was. I'm like, I think we would have broken up.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, that wouldn't have been good. We wouldn't be here.
God, thank God we were like already committed to each other. But it was, I'm so glad that happened. Anyway, that's so funny though. But I had kind of the opposite thing of like, I could already see what that story would sound like. I'm like, nope. I will not. Oh my gosh. Okay. So she gets back in the car. We have this other magic thing where she gets in the carriage and then boop, we're unconscious until ta-da, we show up at the estate. That's so weird. There's so much in these next couple of chapters I feel like that we could talk about, but this is, I mean, I think we can say in general, this is, she just said like, this is my home, I'm leaving my home. And now she goes to this place with,
she's never been to before.
it's actually is a new house. Everything's different. And I don't know if they actually directly say this anywhere, but it doesn't feel like her home.
Yeah. She says, welcome to our home. And she doesn't say something. She doesn't say that. But I like, it says that cracking, caved in feeling in my chest worsened. Tamlin said he'd taken care of my family, but this, like it's this huge opulent estate that's almost rivals the spring court in the estate there.
And there's also,
A bit much.
And there was also a moment, I read it, but I didn't mark it. And maybe it was in the next chapter, but she was like, she wasn't sure how to feel about the fact that they'd done so well without her. Is that the next chapter? I don't remember. One of these chapters, they all kind of run together, seeing how well they'd done without her and just recognizing how everything feels so different. And it was making me think about the difference between like our family, like our blood relatives, and like our people, our tribe. And my husband and I, we were talking about this the other day about how, looking at some of my family, I'm like, my family's not my people. Like the way they see the world, the way they operate in the world, much of it not necessarily bad or wrong. Some of it I think bad or wrong whenever I'm going to have a judgy moment, but they're happy and they have their life, and it doesn't resonate for me. Like there's not that connection with the way that they see life. And we were like, I wish I knew the percentage, and I would be curious to hear like from our audience, like how many people, when they look at their family of origin, does it actually feel like, okay, this is my tribe, this is my
feels
people,
like home.
And how many people feel like they don't fit in with that group? Because I think she was starting to feel like she fit in with Tamlin and Lucy, like in the spring court. Like she was finally feeling safe. And I think it was more than just the money. Like it was more than just having enough. Because I think even when they had enough money, it's not like her and Nesta's relationship was ever great.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was super interesting, but to see her having left and found some of her people and then to go back and be with her family and notice that
Yeah,
contrast.
I love the way she describes Nesta here. Speaking of that, I'd forgotten how cunning her eyes were, how cold. She'd been made differently from something harder and stronger than bone and blood. She was as different from the humans around us as I had become.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if now she maybe is starting to feel like Nesta was always different, but now she also feels just as different from the other humans. And now she and Nesta have that in common. Like they're both very different from a normal human.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like there was so much. I'm like, I think this is one of those chapters like that probably everybody who reads this is going to get something different out of it. And there were so many different, there were so many, there's so much in this chapter that we could talk about. Yeah, but that I felt like I really related to the idea of going away and like finding people and then coming back to visit home. Like that was college for me, like having grown up in my town. It's not like I didn't have friends or have like friend groups, but I did always feel a little bit like I didn't quite fit in with my family. And I think there's a measure of that that's just part of like growing up and like understanding your own identity. But I mean like really not fitting in there. And then going to college and starting to build really fantastic friendships and finding people who it was so weird. It was so weird to me at college because I was like Feyre and I had this whole story of like being less than and being not enough and always feeling like I was such a failure and that everybody hated me. And then I went to college and I'm like, everybody likes me? Like I had so many friends and people who really seemed to genuinely enjoy who I was, even though I was like super awkward freshman year of college. But like I had best friend, like I had like a girl best friend and a guy best friend, and I spent all of my time with them, and I had so much fun. And I felt like I had like a Feyre moment where like, oh my gosh, like I feel like loved and safe, and I'm starting to like get to kind of like see myself and what that looks like. And then I would go home for like visits, and I'm like, oh,
This feels wrong.
But through the years, all the way up to now, so I'm 38 now. So this was when I was 18. So over the last 20 years, I think one of the most fascinating things for me has been each time that I go home to visit family, really believing like I don't think they've really changed all that much, but how different my experience is in like each different season. And it's sort of become a marker for me of how I've changed based on how I experience them and what all that dialogue looks like, what that, how free I feel to be myself in those situations, like what I'm noticing. It's like a fascinating study in so many ways.
Yeah.
But I relate to this, like it's that going home moment being, it's different when you're in it all the time. And then you have a break from something and you go back the way that there's like the fresh eyes looking at everything.
Yeah. Well, and she has fresh new things to look like. It's a really interesting experience
it's so
like,
interesting.
which my mom went through something, nothing like this, but when she went away to college, as soon as she left, her parents moved down to Honduras to be missionaries. So she was no home to go home to. So when she went home, it was going to the mission field in Honduras. So it was like a similar thing. Like you can't ever go back home. Now your new home is
it's
not
different.
home at all. It's a completely different world.
That's so crazy. Okay, but so this experience of her,
And they found the ships. All the ships that we had lost were found. It's so great.
oh my
Like
goodness.
Tamlin just made just magic.
All right, isn't that
for the whole
chapter
family?
Is that in chapter 20 or is that 29?
28.
Okay, so in 28.
All the
Oh,
ships.
so we learn about all that stuff. Okay. So at the end of this chapter, she sort of sums it up, that she understands that he, this carriage is going back away from her, back to her true home, back to Tamlin. She understood that he loved her, but also like, I had to stay. It was wise to stay here. That's what she had convinced herself of the last chapter.
It's wise to stay here, but
Except she's like, wait a minute though.
I couldn't fight the sensation like a darkening shadow within me that I'd made a very, very big mistake in leaving, no matter Tamlin's orders.
Yeah, because I mean, this is the only thing the serial
I
had said was
can't.
stay with the High Lord. What she did, I just shoved that thought from my mind.
Yep. Another Scarlet O'Hara moment. We'll think about that tomorrow.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So she's having this moment. Yeah, which I mean, like again, I have some compassion here. I feel like there's so when we think about like decisions or choices, I used to have a lot of like try to figure out the right choice, and I'm like, I don't know, that language doesn't serve me anymore. Like, I feel like these days, whenever I'm presented with a crossroads, I'm just like, can there just be some clarity? Like, it's not even like, can there be some clarity on there being a clear path? Because I feel like so often it's this, like, it's convoluted, it's messy. Like, there's not always this clear, like, oh, this is obviously the path ahead. And I don't know, struggling with that as a person who's always wanting to get things right, like having to make peace with the fact that
Clarity comes through action.
uh-huh.
And damn it, we want the clarity to know what action to take. And instead, you got to take the action to find out if it was the right one or not.
Right. And yeah, exactly here. And sometimes it's interesting looking back and being like, it's been interesting having those moments like Feyre just had where in the moment and I think the biggest thing that gets me in trouble is making decisions based only on logic, which is kind of what she did. She's like, well, here's this information, here's this thing. She's like, and I think in her gut, she knew that wasn't the right call. And even right now, she's having this gut moment, but she's like, I just won't think about it.
But what could she have done? I mean, like, really, if you put yourself back in chapter 27, like, what, when he's like, you got to go. I mean, how would that have worked out if she'd been like, no, I'm just staying? I don't know how it would have worked, but
You know, that's an
just a different reading.
That is an interesting question. It's like, was there, yeah, because Lucian's like, you know, I thought you were smarter than this. Like, Alice is clearly mad at her. Like, there's more going on, but he could have just magicked her and threw her in a carriage, right? So like, was there? That's a great question I hadn't thought about. Of like, was there actually even anything different that she could have done? I don't know.
We'll never know, damn it.
We won't ever know. We won't ever know. But I love, but yeah, but the bigger point of two things, as I make decisions more and more, not just checking in with my thinking brain. And this is why, like when I do stuff with clients, you know, I call it whole brain coaching, but I'm like, we do need to consult logic and emotional information and nervous system information. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to listen to my thinking brain over my, you know, emotional like limbic brain. I'm like, no, like everybody gets a voice. And that's the way I describe it, where I'm like, it's sort of like, this is like your, it's like a panel or like a, yeah, what are those called? Yeah, like a panel or, you know, a round table discussion where you need to hear from all parts of yourself and then make a decision, because a lot of times the two of the voices, one will say one thing and one will say the other, and we have to like sort through that information to make an informed decision. But most people just pit the parts of themselves against each other. It's like, oh, I'll listen to my logic, not my emotions. I'm like, what if we listened to both and our nervous system and then took this information and used it to make a decision? But it's a different way of looking at the world. But for me, it's been really important in like not disregarding emotional information, of like recognizing, okay, logically this makes sense, but somewhere in my gut it feels off.
Yeah.
And starting to learn to listen to that and pay attention to that. Yeah, because here she has this information from the serial and she lets it be overridden.
Just stuck with that.
But again, the truth of like, would it have actually, could she have actually changed the outcome here? I don't know. But either way, she's here, she's with her family, but she is not feeling good about it.
No, not at home with this decision that she's made.
It does not feel quite right to her. Okay.
End of chapter 27, 28.
In chapter 27, 28. Okay. I can't wait to get to the next one. Oh my gosh, we just have to, I feel like we're getting to the place in this book where we're almost to that place. Like not quite there. It's still going to come a little bit when you you reach a point in books where you can't go slowly. Like the beginning of this book is like, oh yeah, you can read a chapter or two a day, and then you start to hit a point where like the reading just has to speed up.
Yeah,
and then you have that night where you have to stay up till 1 a.m. because you just have to do the next chapter. I feel like even with these podcast episodes, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're getting there, because like, oh my gosh, okay, so what's next? What's next? What's next?
Yeah.
You have to come back to the next episode, guys, and hear about it.
Thank you for watching today. We will we'll be back soon with chapter 29. But in the meantime, join us over at our community at ACOTAR. That's ACOTAA.circle.so, where you can watch these podcasts and interact with them, leave comments, leave pictures of your poodle in a skirt, or whatever it is that you want to share with us today. Leave your opinion of what she should have done, could have done, and get involved in a deeper way. We'll see you over there.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.